I stood there in the pouring rain suitcase, gripping my numb fingers, watching 12 years of marriage dissolve before my eyes. My wife Sarah had just screamed at me to leave over accusations from my 17-year-old stepdaughter Jessica that I had inappropriately touched her. Lightning split the dark sky as I walked toward my truck, every step feeling like betrayal, stabbing deeper into my chest. How could the girl I raised since she was 5 destroy everything with such calculated lies? My phone buzzed with an unknown number as I reached my vehicle. The sheriff deputy's voice cut through the storm. "Mr. Henderson, we need you to come to the hospital immediately. There's been an incident involving your stepdaughter." The windshield wipers beat frantically against the storm as I drove toward Mercy General Hospital, my mind spinning back to the nightmare that began just 3 hours earlier. I had knocked on Jessica's bedroom door that morning to remind her about cleaning her room before our family barbecue. What happened next still felt like stepping into an alternate reality where everything familiar became twisted and dangerous. Jessica had opened the door wearing that defiant expression I had grown accustomed to over the past few months, ever since her 17th birthday 2 weeks ago, when Sarah and I decided against buying her the expensive sports car she demanded. Our once loving stepdaughter had become increasingly hostile and manipulative. But nothing prepared me for what came out of her mouth that morning. "Mom," Jessica had screamed down the hallway, her voice carrying an urgency that made my blood run cold. "Mom, come here right now." Sarah appeared from the kitchen dish towel still in her hands, concern etched across her features. "What's wrong, honey?" Jessica pointed at me with a trembling finger, tears streaming down her cheeks in what I now recognized as a carefully orchestrated performance. He touched me inappropriately when I opened the door. He put his hands on me and said things. The color drained from Sarah's face as she looked between Jessica and me. I felt the world tilt sideways, my mouth opening and closing without sound as I processed the magnitude of what was happening. 12 years of raising this child, of being her soccer coach, helping with homework, attending every school play and graduation, and she was destroying me with a single sentence. "That's not true," I managed to stammer, but Sarah was already moving toward Jessica, wrapping protective arms around her shoulders. "How could you?" Sarah's voice rose to a shriek that seemed to shake the windows. "How could you do this to her? To us?" I tried to explain, tried to reason with the woman I had shared a bed with for over a decade, but rational thought had abandoned the room. Sarah's eyes blazed with fury and disgust as she pointed toward the stairs. "Get your things and get out of my house. You don't belong here anymore." The words hit me like physical blows. Jessica stood behind her mother, and for just a moment, when Sarah wasn't looking, I caught something in the teenager's eyes that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't trauma or fear. It was satisfaction. A cold, calculating triumph that she quickly masked when Sarah turned back around. "Sarah, please," I begged, reaching out toward my wife. "You know me. You know I would never hurt Jessica or anyone else." "I thought I knew you," she spat back. "But monsters are good at hiding, aren't they?" As I packed my belongings under Sarah's watchful glare, Jessica appeared in our bedroom doorway. Sarah had gone downstairs to call her sister, leaving us alone for the first time since the accusation. "You'll never prove anything," Jessica whispered, her voice devoid of the tears she had been shedding moments before. "And even if you try, who do you think people will believe, the stepfather or the innocent teenage girl?" The cruelty in her tone was unlike anything I had ever heard from the child I had loved and raised as my own. This wasn't the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap during movie nights, or the teenager who had hugged me just last month after I helped her pass her driving test. Now, sitting in my truck outside the hospital, I realized that Jessica's smirk as I carried my suitcase to the door should have been my first clue that this was bigger than a simple accusation. But I had been too devastated by my wife's instant rejection to think clearly. Deputy Martinez met me at the hospital entrance, his expression grim but not accusatory, which surprised me given the circumstances. He was a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes that seemed to assess people carefully before making judgments. "Mr. Henderson, your stepdaughter was found unconscious in the high school parking lot about an hour ago. Apparent drug overdose, though we're still determining what substance was involved." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. Despite everything that had happened, Jessica was still the child I had raised, and the thought of her lying unconscious filled me with terror and guilt. Had my presence in her life somehow driven her to this? Sarah was in the waiting room, her face streaked with mascara and her hands shaking as she clutched her purse. When she saw me, her expression hardened again. But there was something else there now. Confusion. Fear. "The doctor said they found prescription medication in her system," Sarah said without looking directly at me. "High levels of something that doesn't match anything she should have access to." Dr. Williams appeared before I could respond, his white coat pristine despite the chaos of the emergency room. He was a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor that immediately put people at ease even in crisis situations. "The blood work shows significant levels of lorazepam in Jessica's system," he explained. "That's an anti-anxiety medication typically prescribed for adults. Do either of you take anything like that?" Sarah's face went pale as she nodded slowly. "I have a prescription for anxiety, but I keep it locked in my medicine cabinet." Before Dr. Williams could respond, the waiting room doors burst open and a teenage girl with short brown hair and tear-stained cheeks rushed toward us. I recognized Ashley Thompson, Jessica's best friend since middle school. She was typically a quiet, well-behaved girl who seemed to balance out Jessica's more rebellious tendencies. "Mrs. Henderson." Ashley gasped, clearly distraught. "I need to tell you something about Jessica. Something important." Deputy Martinez stepped forward, his professional instincts engaged. "What do you need to tell us, Ashley?" The teenager pulled out her phone with trembling hands, her breath coming in short gasps as she struggled to speak. "Jessica called me this morning right after." She glanced at me nervously. "After what happened at your house. She was laughing and telling me how she had finally gotten rid of Ben." Sarah's face crumpled in confusion. "What do you mean, gotten rid of him?" Ashley's finger hovered over her phone screen. "She told me she made up the whole thing about Ben touching her. She said she was angry about not getting a car for her birthday and decided to make him pay for it. She said you would never believe him over her, and once he was gone you'd feel so guilty you'd buy her anything she wanted." The waiting room fell silent except for the distant sounds of hospital machinery and muffled conversations. Sarah stared at Ashley as if the words weren't processing, while Deputy Martinez stepped closer with renewed interest. "She recorded herself saying all this?" he asked. Ashley nodded miserably. "She was bragging about how smart she was and how easy it had been to fool you. She said she had been planning this for weeks, ever since you told her she couldn't have the car. But then she started talking about taking some pills to make herself sick so you'd feel even worse, and..." Ashley's voice broke. "I should have stopped her. I should have called someone." With a shaking finger, Ashley pressed play on her phone. Jessica's voice filled the waiting room, clear and unmistakably proud. "Ashley, you should have seen Mom's face when I told her Ben touched me. She went completely crazy and threw him out just like I knew she would. He looked so pathetic standing there trying to defend himself. The best part is, even if he tries to deny it, who's going to believe him? I've got Mom wrapped around my finger and now she'll do anything to make up for putting me through this trauma. I might get that car after all, plus a whole lot more." The recording continued, with Jessica laughing about how she had stolen some of her mother's anxiety pills to make herself sick, thinking it would be the perfect finishing touch to her performance. She had planned to be found unconscious so Sarah would blame Ben for driving her to a breakdown. Sarah collapsed into a plastic chair, her face white as paper. The woman who had screamed at me to leave her house just hours ago was now staring at the phone as if it contained a message from another planet. The hospital waiting room felt like a courtroom as Deputy Martinez replayed Ashley's recording for the second time. Each word that came from Jessica's voice carried the weight of destroyed trust and shattered assumptions. Sarah sat motionless, her hands pressed against her mouth as she listened to her daughter's casual cruelty. "I can't believe this," Sarah whispered when the recording ended. "I can't believe I—" She looked at me with eyes full of horror and regret. "Ben, what have I done?" The pain in my chest was indescribable. Part of me wanted to comfort the woman I had loved for 12 years, but another part of me was still reeling from how quickly she had condemned me without a moment's hesitation or benefit of doubt. Ashley wiped tears from her cheeks as she explained how the morning had unfolded from her perspective. "Jessica called me right after you left Ben. She was so excited about her plan working. She kept saying how she had been watching you and Mrs. Henderson for weeks, learning your routines and figuring out the best way to break you two up." Deputy Martinez took notes as Ashley continued. "She said she had been stealing Mrs. Henderson's pills a little at a time so no one would notice. She thought if she took enough to get sick, but not enough to really hurt herself, it would be the perfect revenge. She wanted you both to think Ben had driven her to a breakdown." The magnitude of Jessica's calculated manipulation was becoming clear, but Ashley wasn't finished with her revelations. She shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Sarah and me. "There's something else," Ashley said quietly. "Jessica has been reading your text messages, Mrs. Henderson. She knows about David." The blood drained from Sarah's face so quickly I thought she might faint. My own confusion must have been obvious because Deputy Martinez looked between us with professional curiosity. "Who's David?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. "David Morrison, he's a co-worker." The name hit me like a physical blow. David Morrison had been my roommate and best friend in college. We had been inseparable until graduation, when life took us in different directions. I knew he had moved back to our area recently, but Sarah had never mentioned working with him. "What about David?" I pressed though my voice sounded hollow to my own ears. Ashley looked miserable as she continued. "Jessica showed me some of the messages. She said she was going to use them to make sure you never came back, even if her first plan didn't work. She said her mom had been having an affair and she had proof." The waiting room spun around me as the full scope of betrayal became clear. Not only had Jessica orchestrated elaborate lies to destroy my reputation, but she had been leveraging my wife's infidelity as backup ammunition. The woman I had trusted completely had been betraying me while her daughter planned my destruction. Sarah buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "It's not what you think, Ben. David and I, we haven't. It was just emotional. I was confused and—" "How long?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. 2 months, she admitted without lifting her head. "But we never— it was just talking. I was feeling distant from you and he was going through his divorce and—" Dr. Williams interrupted our family crisis by approaching with a clipboard and concerned expression. "Jessica is awake now, but she's asking to speak with someone about the accusations she made earlier. She seems quite agitated." Deputy Martinez nodded. "We need to question her about the false report and the drug incident. Mr. Henderson, would you like to be present when we speak with her?" The thought of facing Jessica after everything she had done filled me with a mixture of anger and exhaustion, but I needed to hear her explain herself, needed to understand how the little girl I had raised could harbor such calculated hatred. Jessica's hospital room was sterile and bright monitoring equipment beeping steadily beside her bed. When she saw me enter with Deputy Martinez and Sarah, her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on defiant resignation. "I suppose Ashley told you everything," Jessica said, her voice hoarse but lacking any genuine remorse. "Why," Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this to Ben? To our family?" Jessica's laugh was bitter and cold. "Our family? Ben isn't my family. He's just some guy who married my mom and thinks he can tell me what to do. And you've been cheating on him anyway, so don't pretend like we're some perfect, happy family." The casual cruelty in her tone was devastating. This wasn't a confused teenager lashing out in pain. This was calculated destruction delivered with adult-level sophistication. "Jessica," I said quietly, "I've loved you, like my own daughter, since you were 5 years old. I taught you to ride a bike, helped you with homework every night, went to every school event. How can you throw all that away over a car?" "Because none of that was real," she shot back. "You were just playing house with Mom. And now that I'm almost 18, I don't need either of you anymore." Deputy Martinez stepped forward with his notebook. "Jessica, making a false police report is a serious crime, especially when it involves accusations of sexual assault. The district attorney will likely press charges regardless of your age." For the first time, Jessica's confident facade cracked slightly. "But I'm taking it back now. I'm telling the truth." "The damage has already been done," Deputy Martinez explained. "You've potentially destroyed an innocent man's reputation, caused emotional trauma to your family, and wasted emergency resources with your overdose stunt. These actions have serious legal consequences." As Jessica began to understand the gravity of her situation, her phone buzzed with a text message. She grabbed it quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse of the sender's name. Tyler. "Who's Tyler?" I asked. Jessica's face went white. "No one, just a friend." But Ashley, who had been quietly listening from the corner, spoke up. "Tyler Carson. He's 22 and works at the auto parts store downtown. Jessica's been dating him for months, but she told me not to tell you guys because you wouldn't approve of the age difference." The pieces of a larger puzzle were beginning to fit together, and none of them painted a picture I wanted to see. A 17-year-old girl secretly dating a 22-year-old man, stealing prescription medication, fabricating sexual assault accusations, and leveraging her mother's affair. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This was something much darker. Dr. Williams returned to the room with a grave expression. "I need to speak with the family privately. The blood work has revealed some additional concerns." In the hallway away from Jessica's hearing, the doctor delivered news that sent shockwaves through our already fractured family. "Jessica is pregnant," he said simply. "About 8 weeks along, based on the hormone levels in her blood." Sarah swayed on her feet, and I instinctively reached out to steady her before remembering the gulf that now existed between us. The pregnancy explained so much about Jessica's recent behavior, changes her desperation to get away from parental supervision, and her increasingly erratic decisions. "There's more," Dr. Williams continued. "The medication overdose could have serious implications for the pregnancy. We'll need to monitor her closely over the next few days." As we absorbed this information, the sound of raised voices echoed from Jessica's room. Through the partially open door, we could see a young man with sleeve tattoos and an aggressive stance arguing with the nurse. "I want to see Jessica right now," he was saying. "She called me and told me what happened." "Where is she?" Deputy Martinez immediately moved toward the room, his hand resting on his radio. "Sir, you need to step back and identify yourself." "Tyler Carson." The young man said, his eyes wild with panic and anger. "Jessica's my girlfriend, and I want to know what you people have done to her." The conversation that followed revealed the full scope of Jessica's deception and criminal planning. Tyler, clearly intoxicated and emotional, began revealing details about their relationship and future plans that Jessica had obviously not intended for anyone to hear. "She was supposed to text me when the coast was clear." Tyler said, his words slurred. "After she got rid of her stepdad and got access to her mom's bank account, we were going to take the money and head to California. She said her mom would be so guilty about believing the lie about Ben that she'd do anything Jessica wanted." The room fell silent as the implications hit everyone simultaneously. This wasn't just about a teenager acting out over a car. This was a coordinated plan to commit fraud, destroy my reputation, and steal money. Deputy Martinez immediately called for backup as Tyler continued to incriminate himself and Jessica. "She's got the account numbers and everything. We figured with her mom feeling guilty and Ben out of the picture, Jessica could convince her to give us money for therapy or college or whatever. And if that didn't work, Jessica knows her mom's passwords." As Tyler was handcuffed and read his rights, I realized that Jessica's accusation against me was just the opening move in a much larger game of manipulation and theft. She hadn't just been trying to get revenge for not getting a car. She had been systematically planning to destroy our family and steal everything she could before disappearing with her adult boyfriend. The fluorescent hospital lights cast harsh shadows across Sarah's tear-stained face as Deputy Martinez led Tyler Carson away in handcuffs. The young man's drunken confessions had exposed the full scope of Jessica's criminal conspiracy, but my mind was still processing the earlier revelation about Sarah's affair with David Morrison. "Ben, we need to talk," Sarah said quietly as Jessica was moved to a secure wing of the hospital for observation. "About David, about everything." I followed her to an empty family consultation room, my emotions swinging between rage, heartbreak, and exhaustion. The woman sitting across from me looked like a stranger, despite sharing 12 years of marriage birthday celebrations, holiday traditions, and quiet Sunday mornings. "How long have you been planning to leave me?" I asked. Sarah's face crumpled. "I wasn't planning to leave you. I was confused and lonely, and David just understood what I was going through with work stress and Jessica's behavior. What you were going through." The words came out harsher than I intended. "Sarah, I've been here. Every single day for 12 years, I've been here. When Jessica had nightmares about her biological father who stayed up with her. When you got laid off 3 years ago who worked double shifts to keep us afloat." "I know," she whispered. "I know you've been good to us. That's what makes this so much worse." I pulled out my phone and opened her text message history, my hands shaking slightly as I scrolled through weeks of deleted conversations with David. Modern technology had a way of preserving secrets that people thought they had erased. "Tell me about these," I said, showing her the recovered messages. Sarah's face went white as she read her own words on my screen. Messages about feeling unappreciated in our marriage, complaints about our routine becoming boring speculation about what life might have been like if she had made different choices. "How did you—" she started. "Our phones share a cloud backup," I explained. "Everything you deleted was still there, including the messages about giving David a key to our house." The revelation hung between us like a third person in the room. Sarah had given another man access to our home, our private space, while I was working 10-hour days to provide for our family. We never, Sarah stammered. "He's been in our house while I was at work," I continued. "In our bedroom, Sarah. Jessica knew about it because she saw him there." The pieces of the puzzle were forming a picture that made me physically sick. Jessica hadn't just stumbled upon evidence of her mother's affair through text messages. She had witnessed David Morrison in our home, in our most private spaces, while I was earning the money that kept our family functioning. "Jessica used your guilt about the affair to manipulate the situation," I said, my voice becoming eerily calm. "She knew you'd be quick to believe anything that would justify pushing me away." Sarah's sobs filled the small room, but I felt disconnected from her pain. The woman who had screamed at me to leave our house was the same woman who had been betraying our marriage for months. "David told me he was researching investment properties in the area," Sarah said between tears. "He said he wanted to buy a house near his new job and asked if he could look at our neighborhood during the day when you were working. I didn't think—" "You gave him our house key so he could look at the neighborhood?" "He said he wanted to see what the area was like during daytime hours, check traffic patterns and noise levels. It seemed reasonable." The naivety of that explanation was almost insulting. David Morrison was a college-educated man in his 30s who could easily research neighborhoods without needing access to our private home. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed my business partner, Marcus Rodriguez, and I could see immediately that something was wrong. "Ben, we need to talk," Marcus said without preamble. "Someone called the Better Business Bureau and the state licensing board with accusations about our company." My stomach dropped. "What kind of accusations?" "They're saying you've been using company funds for personal expenses and that you've been inappropriate with female clients. The complaints are anonymous, but they're detailed enough that the licensing board is opening an investigation." The systematic destruction of my life was becoming clear. Jessica's accusation was just one part of a larger campaign to destroy my reputation, my marriage, and my business. Marcus, none of that is true. You know me. I know Hermano, but the board doesn't. They've frozen our license pending investigation. We can't take any new contracts until this gets resolved. After hanging up, I looked at Sarah with a mixture of sadness and anger. They've destroyed my business too. Anonymous complaints about financial misconduct and inappropriate behavior with clients. Sarah's face showed genuine shock. Jessica couldn't have. Jessica's dating a 22-year-old who clearly has more sophisticated criminal knowledge than we realized. This isn't just teenage rebellion, Sarah. This is organized destruction. Deputy Martinez knocked on the consultation room door, his expression grim. Mr. Henderson, we need to discuss some additional evidence that's come to light. He showed us printed copies of social media posts from various local parenting groups and community Facebook pages. Anonymous accounts had been spreading rumors about me for weeks, painting me as a predatory stepfather who couldn't be trusted around children. These posts started appearing 3 weeks ago, Deputy Martinez explained. They're subtle but effective, designed to create doubt about your character without making specific accusations that could be traced. The sophistication of the campaign was breathtaking. Someone had been systematically destroying my reputation in the community long before Jessica's false accusation. Parents had been discussing whether to allow me to volunteer at school. Events neighbors had been warned to keep their children away from our house. We believe Tyler Carson has experience with this type of harassment campaign, Deputy Martinez continued. He has a juvenile record that includes cyberbullying and fraud. Jessica may have been the inside source, but Tyler likely planned the execution. As we absorbed this information, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed David Morrison. Don't answer it, I said, but Sarah was already touching the screen. David, this isn't a good time, she said, putting the phone on speaker. Sarah, I heard about what happened with Ben and Jessica. Are you okay? Do you need me to come to the hospital? The concern in his voice sounded genuine, but I noticed he didn't express any surprise about Jessica's accusations. Most people would have been shocked to hear about such serious allegations. Ben found out about us, Sarah said quietly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What exactly did he find out? Everything. The text messages, the house key, all of it. Sarah, we need to talk privately. There are things about this situation you don't understand. Deputy Martinez gestured for us to keep David talking while he signaled for his partner to trace the call. What don't I understand? Sarah asked. Ben isn't who you think he is. I've been investigating him for weeks, and what I've found. Sarah, you and Jessica are lucky to be alive. The audacity of the lie took my breath away. David was trying to manipulate Sarah even now, even after his entire deception had been exposed. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded. I've been documenting evidence of Ben's financial crimes and inappropriate behavior. Why do you think Jessica finally spoke up about what he's been doing to her? I've been encouraging her to tell the truth. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. David hadn't just been having an affair with my wife. He had been grooming Jessica, manipulating a troubled teenager to help him destroy my life. I said, taking the phone from Sarah. This is Ben. Jessica has confessed that she made up the accusations. Your little plan has fallen apart. The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds. When David finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. You can't prove anything, Ben. It's your word against ours, and Jessica will say whatever she needs to say to avoid getting in trouble. Actually, we have recordings of Jessica admitting she lied. We have Tyler Carson in custody confessing to the fraud scheme, and we have evidence of your systematic campaign to destroy my reputation. Good luck proving I had anything to do with Tyler's stupidity, David said. I barely know the kid. But his confidence was misplaced. Deputy Martinez was already holding a printed report showing phone records between David's number and Tyler's number going back 2 months. David Morrison. Deputy Martinez said, taking the phone. This is Sheriff's Deputy Martinez. We need you to come in for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit fraud and defamation." The line went dead. Within 6 hours of Tyler Carson's arrest, the full scope of the criminal conspiracy began to emerge. I sat in the sheriff's department conference room, watching Deputy Martinez spread out evidence that painted a picture of calculated destruction I never could have imagined. "David Morrison has been planning this for at least 3 months," Deputy Martinez explained, pointing to a timeline printed on white paper. "He researched your business, your family, your financial situation, and your daily routines before making contact with Sarah." The methodical nature of the attack was chilling. David hadn't simply run into Sarah at work and developed feelings. He had targeted our family specifically, using my wife as an entry point to destroy everything I had built. "Why me?" I asked. "What did I ever do to David?" Deputy Martinez consulted his notes. "According to bank records and employment history, David Morrison has been struggling financially since his divorce 2 years ago. His ex-wife received half of his assets, including his construction business in Colorado. It appears he came here specifically looking for a way to rebuild his wealth quickly." The irony was devastating. My college roommate and former best friend had decided to destroy my life to rebuild his own. "Your construction company has been very successful," Deputy Martinez continued. "Morrison likely saw an opportunity to eliminate you and take over your client base and contracts." Sarah sat beside me, her face pale with shock and guilt. The woman who had thrown me out of our house 12 hours earlier was now learning that her emotional affair had been orchestrated by a predator who saw her as a tool to destroy her husband. "He told me he was starting fresh after his divorce," Sarah whispered. "He said he wanted to build a new life and maybe find someone to share it with." "He was building a new life," I replied bitterly, "on the ruins of ours." Detective Linda Walsh entered the conference room carrying a laptop and several file folders. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes and fraud cases. "We executed a search warrant on Morrison's apartment," she announced. "What we found is extensive documentation of identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy." She opened the laptop and showed us photographs of David's home office. The walls were covered with pictures of our house, our family, my work schedule, and financial documents that he had somehow obtained. "He has copies of your business records, tax returns, and bank statements," Detective Walsh explained. "He also has detailed plans for taking over your construction contracts after your reputation was destroyed." The violation felt worse than physical assault. David had been studying my life like a predator, stalking prey, learning my vulnerabilities, and planning my destruction. "How did he get access to our financial information?" I asked. Detective Walsh pointed to another section of photographs. "Jessica provided him with documents she copied from your home office. She also gave him passwords and account numbers that she obtained by watching Sarah enter them on her computer." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. My stepdaughter hadn't just made false accusations. She had been systematically stealing our private information and providing it to a man who planned to destroy our family. "There's more," Detective Walsh continued. "Morrison has been running a similar scheme in Colorado before moving here. He targeted divorced or unhappy wives, manipulated them into affairs, then used their guilt and confusion to destroy their marriages and steal assets." Sarah made a choking sound and covered her mouth with her hand. She was realizing that every private conversation, every moment of emotional intimacy with David had been calculated manipulation designed to use her against me. "His ex-wife has agreed to testify," Detective Walsh said. "Morrison destroyed her first marriage using similar tactics before marrying her and taking half her assets in the divorce. The man was a professional predator who specialized in destroying families for financial gain." I felt sick thinking about how close he had come to succeeding. "What about Tyler and Jessica?" I asked. Deputy Martinez flipped to another section of his report. "Tyler Carson has prior arrests for fraud and drug dealing. Morrison recruited him specifically for this operation because he needed someone who could manipulate Jessica and execute the more criminal aspects of the plan. The use of a vulnerable teenager as a tool in their scheme was particularly disgusting. Jessica was troubled and rebellious, but she was still a child who had been exploited by adult criminals. Morrison convinced Jessica that you were preventing her from having the life she deserved, Detective Walsh explained. He painted you as a controlling stepfather who was limiting her freedom and potential. Sarah spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. Jessica always respected Ben before this year. Something changed, but I thought it was normal teenage rebellion. Morrison had been grooming her for months, Detective Walsh said. He would visit when you were working Ben and slowly poison Jessica's perception of you. He convinced her that false accusations would be justified because you were allegedly controlling and abusive. The systematic manipulation of a child for criminal purposes made me want to find David Morrison and confront him physically. But I forced myself to stay focused on the legal process and gathering evidence. Tyler's role was to provide Jessica with drugs and teach her how to steal information and money. Deputy Martinez continued. He also helped her create fake social media accounts to spread rumors about Ben in the community. My phone rang with a call from Marcus Rodriguez. Ben, you need to know that someone broke into our office last night. They stole client files, contracts, and financial records. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Marcus, call the police immediately and tell them this is connected to the Morrison investigation. After hanging up, I looked at the detectives. They burglarized my business office last night. Detective Walsh nodded grimly. Morrison is accelerating his timeline. He knows we're closing in, so he's trying to steal as much as he can before he runs. Within 2 hours, police had connected the business burglary to Tyler Carson through fingerprints left on my office filing cabinets. The young man had been released on bail that morning and immediately went to steal documents that Morrison needed to take over my business contracts. We're issuing arrest warrants for both Morrison and Carson, Deputy Martinez announced. Morrison will be charged with conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, and corruption of a minor. Carson will face burglary, theft, and drug charges. But the most difficult conversation was still ahead. Jessica was awake in her hospital room, and the district attorney needed to determine what charges to file against a pregnant 17-year-old who had been manipulated by adult criminals. She's a victim and a perpetrator, Detective Walsh explained as we walked toward the hospital. Morrison exploited her vulnerabilities, but she made conscious choices to participate in criminal activities. I felt conflicted about Jessica's fate. She had nearly destroyed my life with deliberate lies and theft, but she was also a child who had been groomed and manipulated by sophisticated criminals. In Jessica's hospital room, the teenager looked smaller and more fragile than she had that morning. The pregnancy and drug overdose had taken a physical toll, but her eyes still held traces of defiance. "I want a lawyer," she said as soon as she saw Detective Walsh. "You have the right to an attorney," Detective Walsh replied professionally. "But first we want you to understand what's happened to Tyler and David Morrison." Jessica's confidence wavered when she learned about the arrests and evidence. She had believed that her adult conspirators would protect her, but they had abandoned her as soon as the plan collapsed. "Tyler said we would go to California together," Jessica said quietly. "He said David would give us money to start over." "Jessica," I said gently, "David Morrison was using you to steal money and destroy our family. He never intended to help you build a new life." For the first time since the crisis began, Jessica looked like a confused and frightened child rather than a calculating criminal. The reality of being pregnant, abandoned by her criminal boyfriend, and facing serious charges was finally penetrating her teenage sense of invincibility. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "David said you would just leave and Mom would be happier without you." The admission was heartbreaking, but also infuriating. Jessica had been willing to destroy my reputation and marriage based on the manipulations of a man she barely knew. "Jessica," Sarah said, her voice heavy with guilt and sadness. "Ben has been nothing but good to us for 12 years. He raised you, supported us, and loved us unconditionally. How could you believe that our lives would be better without him?" Jessica's response revealed the depth of Morrison's manipulation. "David showed me bank statements and said Ben was stealing money from the business to control us. He said Ben was preventing me from going to college and getting the things I deserved. The lies had been sophisticated and targeted to Jessica's specific insecurities about money freedom and her future prospects. Morrison had turned a rebellious teenager into a weapon against her own family. As we prepared to leave the hospital, Jessica made one final revelation that changed everything. David has been recording you guys. He has cameras in the house. The revelation about hidden cameras in our home sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detective Walsh immediately dispatched a forensics team to search our house, while I tried to process the complete violation of our privacy that had been occurring for weeks. Where did Morrison place the cameras? Detective Walsh asked Jessica during her interview. In the living room, the kitchen, and… Jessica hesitated, looking ashamed for the first time since the crisis began. In your bedroom. Sarah made a strangled sound and gripped my arm. The thought of David Morrison watching our most intimate moments was nauseating and humiliating. He said he needed evidence of Ben's abusive behavior, Jessica continued. He told me to act scared around Ben when the cameras were recording so he could show people how mean Ben was to me. The sophistication of the entrapment was breathtaking. Morrison had been creating fake evidence while using my stepdaughter as an actress in his fraudulent production. How long have the cameras been there? I asked. About 6 weeks. David installed them when you were working and Mom was at her therapy appointment. The timeline made sense. Sarah had been attending counseling for work-related stress, which gave Morrison access to our house during predictable windows when I was at work and Sarah was away. Within 4 hours, the forensics team had discovered 5 hidden cameras throughout our house, along with sophisticated recording equipment hidden in our garage. The devices were professional-grade surveillance tools, not amateur spy gadgets. Morrison has been selling the recordings, Detective Walsh announced after reviewing the equipment. We found evidence that he was marketing videos of your private life to online voyeurism websites. The violation reached a new level of degradation. Not only had Morrison been planning to steal our assets and destroy my reputation, but he had been profiting from selling our private moments to strangers on the internet. This elevates the charges significantly, Detective Walsh explained. Voyeurism, invasion of privacy, and distribution of intimate images without consent are serious felonies. My phone rang with a call from my attorney Robert Chen, whom I had contacted that morning when the scope of the criminal conspiracy became clear. Ben, I have good news and challenging news, Robert said. The good news is that the evidence against Morrison and Carson is overwhelming. They're going to prison. The challenging news is that rebuilding your reputation and business will take time and effort. What do you recommend? We file civil lawsuits against Morrison Carson and everyone who participated in damaging your reputation. We also need to contact every client, vendor, and community organization that received false information about you. The process of restoring my life would be almost as exhausting as the process of having it destroyed, but I was determined to fight back against every lie and every theft. I also recommend a public statement, Robert continued. The local newspaper wants to interview you about the false accusations and the criminal conspiracy. This is your opportunity to tell your side of the story. The interview with the Riverside Tribune took place 2 days later in my attorney's office. Reporter Janet Sullivan was a veteran journalist who specialized in investigative stories, and she had been following the Morrison case since the arrests. Mr. Henderson, how do you respond to people who say that false accusations of sexual assault are rare, and that Jessica must have had legitimate reasons for making these claims? Janet asked. I would say that false accusations are devastating, regardless of how common or rare they are, I replied. Jessica was manipulated by adult criminals who convinced her that destroying my reputation was justified. The real lesson here is that we need to be careful about making assumptions and rushing to judgment, especially when children are involved. What do you want the community to know about this case? I want people to understand that predators come in many forms. David Morrison didn't break into our house or attack us violently. He manipulated emotions, exploited vulnerabilities, and used my own family against me. That kind of predatory behavior is just as dangerous as physical violence. The article was published the following Sunday with the headline, "Local Man Vindicated After Elaborate Criminal Conspiracy." The story detailed Morrison's history of targeting families, the evidence of fraud and voyeurism, and the arrests of all three conspirators. Community response was immediate and supportive. Parents who had shunned me based on anonymous rumors publicly apologized. The school district reinstated my volunteer privileges and asked me to speak at a parent education night about online predators and manipulation tactics. Most importantly, my business clients began returning. Marcus and I received apology calls from contractors who had canceled projects based on the licensing board investigation. The state quickly cleared our company when presented with evidence of Morrison's fraud. "Ben," said Tom Williams, owner of Williams Hardware and one of my oldest clients, "I should have called you directly when I heard those rumors. I've known you for 8 years, and I should have trusted my own experience over anonymous accusations." The conversation was repeated dozens of times as community members realized they had been manipulated by a sophisticated disinformation campaign. But the most difficult relationship to repair was my marriage with Sarah. We began intensive couples counseling with Dr. Patricia Reeves, a specialist in trauma and betrayal recovery. "Sarah, you were targeted by a professional manipulator," Dr. Reeves explained during our first session. "Morrison identified your vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically. That doesn't excuse your choices, but it provides context for understanding how you were deceived." "I still can't believe I gave him a key to our house," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe I trusted him more than my own husband." "The trust can be rebuilt," Dr. Reeves said, "but it will require complete honesty, consistent behavior over time, and a willingness to examine what made you vulnerable to manipulation in the first place." Sarah's individual therapy revealed that her father's emotional affair when she was a teenager had created deep insecurities about relationships and trust. Morrison had expertly identified and exploited those childhood wounds. "He told me that strong women don't stay in marriages that make them unhappy," Sarah explained. "He said I deserved someone who appreciated my intelligence and independence." "Classic manipulation," Dr. Reeves noted. "He made you feel special and understood while simultaneously undermining your existing relationship." The healing process was slow and painful, but Sarah demonstrated genuine commitment to rebuilding our marriage. She agreed to complete transparency with her phone, email, and social activities. She also committed to individual therapy twice weekly to address her underlying vulnerabilities. "I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately," Sarah told me during one particularly difficult counseling session. "I'm asking for the chance to prove that I can be the wife you deserve." 3 months after the crisis began, David Morrison was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, voyeurism, and corruption of a minor. Tyler Carson received 6 years for his role in the scheme. Both men were ordered to pay restitution for the financial damage they had caused. Jessica's case was more complicated. As a pregnant 17-year-old who had been groomed by adult criminals, she received a suspended sentence with the requirement of completing high school, attending counseling, and performing 500 hours of community service. "I'm sorry, Ben," Jessica said during a family therapy session 6 months after the crisis. "I know that doesn't fix what I did, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was." The apology was meaningful, but trust would take years to rebuild. Jessica had demonstrated that she was capable of elaborate deception and cruelty when it served her purposes. "I accept your apology," I replied, "but our relationship will have to be rebuilt slowly based on consistent, honest behavior over time." Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. I just hope someday you can forgive me completely." "Forgiveness is a process," I said, "but I'm willing to work toward it if you are." The conversation marked the beginning of a long journey toward family healing, but it was a journey I was finally ready to take. 1 year after the crisis that nearly destroyed my life, I stood in the conference room of my expanded construction company, looking at financial reports that showed our best year ever. The criminal conspiracy that had been designed to eliminate my business had ultimately made it stronger and more successful than I had ever imagined possible. "Ben, we've got more work than we can handle," Marcus Rodriguez said, spreading out contracts across the conference table. The publicity from the Morrison case has brought in clients from 3 counties who want to work with someone they know has integrity. The irony was profound. David Morrison's attempt to destroy my reputation had actually enhanced it by demonstrating my character under extreme pressure. Clients appreciated working with someone who had been thoroughly tested and proven trustworthy. "We need to hire 6 more employees to meet demand," Marcus continued, "and I think we should consider opening a second office in the county seat." The business expansion was satisfying, but the personal victories meant more to me. Sarah and I had renewed our wedding vows in a small ceremony, attended only by family and close friends who had supported us through the crisis. "I promise to trust you completely and to never again allow anyone to poison my mind against you," Sarah said during the ceremony, tears streaming down her face. "I promise to be worthy of your forgiveness and your love." The vow renewal wasn't just symbolic. Sarah had completed 18 months of individual therapy and had demonstrated consistent, trustworthy behavior every single day since the crisis. She had also become a powerful advocate for other women who had been manipulated by predators. "I speak at support groups now," Sarah told me as we prepared for the ceremony. "I help other wives understand how emotional manipulation works and how to protect themselves and their families." Her transformation from victim to advocate was inspiring. Sarah had taken her painful experience and used it to help other women avoid similar traps. Jessica's journey was more complicated, but equally meaningful. Now 19, and a mother to 1-year-old Emma, she had completed her community service and was attending community college while working part-time at a local daycare center. "Being a mother changed everything for me," Jessica explained during one of our monthly family dinners. "When I hold Emma, I think about how I would feel if someone tried to destroy her family the way I destroyed ours." Motherhood had given Jessica perspective on the magnitude of her choices. She understood now that her actions had consequences far beyond her own life. "I want Emma to grow up knowing that you're her grandfather," Jessica continued. "I want her to see what a good man looks like so she'll choose well when she's ready for relationships." The conversation represented a level of maturity and insight that Jessica had never shown before the crisis. She had been forced to grow up quickly, but she had chosen to grow in positive directions. "I'm proud of the woman you're becoming," I told her honestly. "It takes courage to acknowledge your mistakes and work to make amends." Jessica smiled through tears. "I learned that from watching you, Ben. You could have walked away from all of us after what we did, but you chose to fight for our family instead." David Morrison and Tyler Carson remained in prison, but their impact on our family had ultimately been positive rather than destructive. They had forced us to confront weaknesses and dishonesty that might have eventually destroyed us anyway. "Sometimes I wonder if we needed that crisis," Sarah reflected as we sat on our back porch one evening watching the sunset. Not the criminal part, but the wake-up call about taking each other for granted. She was probably right. Our marriage had become routine and complacent before Morrison's manipulation. The crisis had forced us to recommit to each other with full awareness of what we could lose. My reputation in the community was stronger than ever. The school district had asked me to serve on the safety committee developing protocols for protecting children from online predators. The sheriff's department invited me to speak at training sessions about recognizing manipulation and conspiracy tactics. "Your case has become a textbook example of organized identity destruction," Hi, Deputy Martinez told me during one of our follow-up meetings. "We're using it to train officers how to recognize sophisticated predators who target families." The educational value of our experience was meaningful. If our pain could prevent other families from experiencing similar destruction, then it served a valuable purpose. But the most satisfying victory was personal. I had learned to trust my own judgment and to value my own worth regardless of other people's opinions or accusations. The crisis had revealed my inner strength and resilience. "You know what I realized," I told Sarah as we prepared for bed one night. "Morrison's biggest mistake was underestimating me. He thought I would crumble under pressure and give up without fighting back." "What made you fight?" Sarah asked. "I knew who I was," I replied. "I knew the life I had built and the man I had become. No amount of lies or accusations could change the truth about my character." That self-knowledge had been my anchor during the storm. When everything else was being destroyed or questioned, I could trust my own integrity and my own choices. The final legal victory came 18 months after the crisis when our civil lawsuit against Morrison resulted in a significant financial settlement. His insurance company paid damages for the voyeurism and defamation, while his seized assets compensated us for the business losses and emotional trauma. We're awarding the Henderson family $850,000 in damages, Judge Patricia Murphy announced in the courtroom packed with media and supporters. The defendant's actions represent a particularly egregious violation of trust and privacy that demands substantial consequences. The money was meaningful, but the legal vindication was more important. A court of law had officially recognized the magnitude of what had been done to our family and had held the perpetrators accountable. Outside the courthouse, Janet Sullivan from the Tribune approached me for a final interview. Mr. Henderson, what advice would you give to other men who find themselves falsely accused or facing family crises? Don't panic and don't give up, I replied. Truth has a way of emerging if you're patient and persistent. Document everything, seek professional help, and trust the legal system to work. What about forgiveness? How do you forgive people who deliberately tried to destroy your life? I thought about the question for several moments before answering. Forgiveness isn't about excusing their behavior or pretending it didn't happen. Forgiveness is about choosing not to let their actions continue controlling your life. I forgave them for my own peace of mind, not for their benefit. The interview aired on the local evening news that night, and I received dozens of calls from men facing similar situations. Some were dealing with false accusations, others with family manipulation, and a few with business sabotage. Your story gives me hope, said Robert Martinez, a divorced father whose ex-wife had been making false accusations to gain custody advantages. If you can survive what you went through, maybe I can get through this too. Those conversations reminded me that our crisis had created opportunities to help other people facing similar challenges. Every person who found strength in our story made the entire ordeal worthwhile. As I reflected on the 3 years since the crisis began, I realized that David Morrison had failed completely. His goal had been to destroy my family business and reputation, to build his own wealth and status. Instead, he had strengthened all three while sending himself to prison. My family was closer and more honest than ever. My business was thriving beyond my previous dreams. My reputation was enhanced rather than damaged, and I had discovered inner reserves of strength and wisdom that I never knew I possessed. Morrison had intended to leave me with nothing, but he had actually given me everything that truly mattered, a deeper understanding of love, trust, resilience, and the power of truth to overcome deception. 5 years have passed since that stormy night when I stood in the rain with a suitcase listening to Jessica's lies destroy 12 years of marriage in a matter of minutes. As I write this, I'm sitting in the expanded offices of Henderson Construction, looking at family photos that include Sarah Jessica, her daughter Emma, and the son that Sarah and I welcomed 2 years ago. David Morrison remains in federal prison, serving his 12-year sentence. Tyler Carson was released after 4 years and immediately moved to another state where he's reportedly working in a warehouse and staying out of trouble. Both men faded from our lives as quickly as they had entered, leaving behind only painful memories and valuable lessons. Jessica graduated from community college last month with an associate degree in early childhood education. She plans to transfer to the state university next fall while Emma stays with us during the day. The 19-year-old who once plotted to destroy our family has become a devoted mother and a mature young woman who understands the value of honesty and hard work. Ben, I need you to know something, Jessica told me at her graduation party. When I was making all those terrible choices, I was angry at the world because I felt abandoned and unloved. But you never abandoned me even when I gave you every reason to walk away. That taught me what real love looks like. Her words meant more to me than any apology or legal victory. The girl I had raised since she was 5 had finally understood that true strength comes from protecting and building up the people you love, not from tearing them down. Sarah and I celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary last month with a cruise to Alaska, something we had always talked about but never prioritized during our busier years. The woman beside me was different from the one who had screamed at me to leave our house, but she was also deeper, wiser, and more committed to our partnership. I learned that I'm capable of terrible judgment when I'm scared and lonely, Sarah reflected as we watched glaciers from the ship's deck. But I also learned that you're capable of forgiveness, even when I don't deserve it. Our marriage counselor, Dr. Reeves, had warned us that rebuilding trust would be a lifelong process rather than a destination. She was right. There are still moments when old insecurities surface, but we've developed tools for addressing them quickly and honestly. Henderson Construction now employs 23 people and has contracts throughout the region. Marcus Rodriguez became my full partner 2 years ago, and we've established a scholarship fund for children from troubled families who want to learn construction trades. You know what I admire about you, Hermano, Marcus said recently as we reviewed our latest expansion plans. You turned the worst experience of your life into fuel for building something better. The business success was gratifying, but the personal growth was more valuable. I had learned to recognize manipulation tactics, to trust my instincts about people's character, and to value relationships that could survive testing over those that seemed too easy or too good to be true. My community involvement expanded beyond business success. The Sheriff's Department invited me to join their Citizen Advisory Board, where I helped develop protocols for domestic violence investigations that protect both accusers and the accused from false or rushed judgments. Your case changed how we handle these situations, Sheriff Williams told me during my swearing-in ceremony. We learned that the truth is often more complicated than initial appearances suggest. I also speak regularly at men's support groups and divorce recovery workshops, sharing lessons learned from surviving false accusations and family betrayal. The men who attend these sessions are often angry, hurt, and confused about how to rebuild their lives. The key is understanding that their actions reveal their character, not yours, I tell them. Don't let someone else's choices define your worth or determine your future. One of the most meaningful aspects of my advocacy work is helping fathers maintain relationships with children who have been turned against them through manipulation. It's heartbreaking work, but also hopeful, because children often recognize the truth as they mature. My teenage daughter believes her mother's lies about me right now, said Frank Thompson during a recent support group meeting. But I'm going to keep being the man I know I am. So when she's ready to see the truth, there will be something good waiting for her. Frank's situation reminded me of my relationship with Jessica during the crisis. I had maintained my integrity and commitment to her even when she was actively trying to destroy me. And eventually she recognized the difference between my character and the lies she had been told. The legal victories continued long after Morrison's imprisonment. 3 other families came forward with evidence that Morrison had attempted similar schemes in previous cities, leading to additional charges and restitution payments. Our experience became part of a larger pattern that helped prosecutors build cases against organized predators. Most importantly, our family learned the difference between forgiveness and trust. I forgave Jessica and Sarah completely, but rebuilding trust required consistent, honest behavior over years. Forgiveness was a decision I made for my own peace of mind. Trust was something they had to earn through change behavior. I understand now that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened, Jessica explained during a recent family therapy session that we still attend monthly. It means choosing to believe that people can change and grow from their mistakes. Her insight demonstrated the emotional maturity that emerged from facing consequences for her choices. Jessica had learned that actions have long-term impacts and that rebuilding relationships requires patience and consistent effort. As I reflect on the entire experience, I realize that David Morrison's greatest failure was underestimating the power of truth and the resilience of people who build their lives on authentic foundations. He assumed that lies and manipulation were stronger than honesty and integrity, but he was catastrophically wrong. The crisis forced our family to examine every assumption, every relationship, and every value we held. What emerged from that examination was a stronger, more honest, and more appreciative family than the one that existed before the storm. I learned that my identity and worth came from my own choices and character, not from other people's opinions or treatments of me. No amount of false accusations or orchestrated destruction could change the fundamental truth about who I had chosen to become. Sarah learned that emotional manipulation preys on unresolved wounds and insecurities, and that protecting her family required understanding her own vulnerabilities. She developed wisdom about recognizing predatory behavior and the strength to trust her existing relationships over exciting new possibilities. Jessica learned that hatred and revenge ultimately destroy the person who harbors them more than their intended targets. She discovered that building something positive requires more courage and effort than tearing something down, but the results are infinitely more satisfying. Together we learned that real love survives testing, while superficial relationships crumble under pressure. We learned that truth eventually emerges if you're patient enough to let justice unfold. Most importantly, we learned that forgiveness and rebuilding are possible, but they require genuine change from everyone involved. The storm that seemed designed to destroy our family ultimately made us stronger, wiser, and more grateful for what we had built together. We learned to value authenticity over appearance of character, over charisma and commitment over convenience. Today, when I look at my expanded family and successful business, I feel grateful for every painful lesson that brought us to this point. The crisis taught us who we really were and what truly mattered, clearing away illusions and superficialities that might have eventually undermined us anyway. Morrison and Carson spent years planning our destruction, but they only succeeded in revealing our strength. They thought they were writing our ending, but they were actually writing our beginning. As I finish this story, I want to leave you with a question that has guided me through every challenge since that stormy night. When everything you think you know about your life is suddenly questioned or threatened, what unchanging truth about yourself can you hold on to? What core values and character traits belong to you, regardless of what others say or do? Those answers will become your anchor during any storm. They will guide you through the darkest moments and help you rebuild something better on the other side of crisis. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that truth is stronger than lies, love is stronger than hate, and your character is determined by your choices, not by other people's actions or opinions. If this story resonated with you or helped you think about challenges in your own life, please take a moment to share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Hit that like button if you believe that integrity and perseverance can overcome even the most sophisticated attacks on your character. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength in difficult circumstances. And most importantly, leave a comment sharing your thoughts about forgiveness, rebuilding trust, or overcoming false accusations. Your insights might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember that every ending can become a new beginning if you have the courage to keep building on the truth about who you choose to be.